I'm really hoping we're live. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Heathen Talk Season 2, Episode 7. Tonight we are talking about oaths and what they mean, what they are, and anything related to them. As always, if you guys like us, let us know on Facebook. If you hate us, let us know on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, email, comment on our page. You can leave a YouTube comment. If for some reason you just...
I'll keep it forever.
We don't post our... We don't have a P.O. box.
That's why I said if you know my address.
Oh,
I'm not giving it to you. I'm going to make work for that shit.
You can give it to me at Midwest Winter Moot coming up.
Give it to her at Midwest Winter Moot. It's good stuff.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, my train of thought got derailed because I heard a whisper in the background and it turned out it was Thorin saying something. What was I saying?
Was it important?
Yeah, it was the house cleaning stuff. If you like us, you know where to find us. If you don't know where to find us, ask somebody on the street. They'll have heard of us. And that's about it. Lauren, do we have any events to talk about this week?
Oh, we have lots of events. I'm going to kick us off with my event coming up next weekend, and that is the Black Bear Kindred / Odin's Children's Central Arkansas meetup. This is going to be next Saturday, and it's going to be at our favorite place, which is Cregan's. If you've never been there, you're missing out because it's really great. We're going to be there starting at 1. We're going to have some lunch, have some drinks, and not go watch Razorbacks. So, and if you're local, you'll completely understand that. Also coming up, the Sacramento Heathen Fellowship will be at Sacramento Pagan Pride this coming weekend, 17th and 18th. That's at Fair Oaks VFW in Fair Oaks, California. They're going to be out there. They're going to have some swag, be promoting their group. So definitely get out there if you're in the area. Over in Eugene, Oregon, there will be a Kenaz Kindred will be having an Oktoberfest, September 20th at Alton Baker Park. They'll be celebrating the mead of poetry and beginning of fall. Arlington Viking Fest, which we'll talk about here in a second, of course, October 1st and 2nd, and we'll be out that way. And then Midwest Winter Moot, November 2nd through 4th. It's going to be at Osage Hill State Park in Oklahoma, put on by my good friends at Bifrost Way Kindred. And it's my favorite event of the year, I'm not going to lie. Really great. We're going to have a lot of fun. We will be able to hang out, meet other heathens in the Midwest who are so much fun, and love everybody up there. And also the cabins are awesome. And I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing some Heathen Talk video shorts. So come up and get on the show with me. That's what we got.
So real quick, I completely forgot, and I want to apologize to our good friends over at the Arlington Viking Days. Forgot to let everybody know that this week's episode is brought to you by the Arlington Viking Days, and if you happen to be in the Arlington area or within driving distance on the first weekend of October, please head up there and check it out as a historical event. There will be blacksmithing, HEMA fighting, vendors. Every single one of these kinds of events I've ever been to has had great food.
There will be a Heathen Talk booth.
There will be a Heathen Talk booth, and
the blacksmithing that got mentioned will be being done by our fine producer, Matthew. And at some point, I'm going to be slacking off and leaving the Heathen Talk booth to go swing hammers with him.
And I'm intending to be at the Heathen Talk booth myself. So we will see you there, and we are so excited.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
I don't know the rest of that song.
I'm so scared.
So
that's as good as I get.
So this brings us to the part of the show that is a weekly tradition here on Heathen Talk that we frankly love doing and really need you guys to submit more ideas to us for who to toast. Seriously, this is the one part of the show that we're begging for audience participation in. If you know someone who needs to be toasted, please let us know. Give us their background. Tell us what they've done for heathenry. And they may get toasted on the show.
So this week we are toasting someone who is not heathen, but who made kind of the ultimate sacrifice in the betterment of society, someone who honored an oath that he made, and that is my friend Aaron Barker. Aaron was a police officer in the little town that he and I both grew up in. He was younger than I was. He was closer to my brother's age than mine, but I babysit him and his little sister when they were little. And this week, while responding to a officer back who needing backup at a domestic violence call, Aaron had a car accident. He hit a deer and passed away Thursday morning. And so it seemed like a good time to honor someone who, while not heathen, was definitely, he took an oath and he was following a family tradition. His father was a police officer as well, for the small town that we all grew up in. And so, it's with a heavy heart that it happened, but at the same time, I honor him. I honor his oath and the fact that he gave his life for an oath that he made. So, to Aaron.
Aaron.
Sorry, guys.
That's all right. That's understandable.
Oh, it's been a rough week. We've had, but I'm going to say this, and it's a little off topic, but I've had a pretty rough couple of weeks. We've had two people I've been fairly close to have passed away in the past 3 weeks, and without the support of my kindred, I don't know that I would have made it through. Just knowing that I could, I'm bawling in tears and knowing that I had so many people that I could reach out to and say, I'm not okay, I need to talk, and they're there for you. I mean, it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and I feel incredibly lucky to have, we talk a lot about the importance of tribe, but this is why. This is absolutely why.
Absolutely. So on to the less serious part of the toasting tradition that we all thoroughly enjoy. Lauren, what vintage Diet Coke are you drinking tonight?
Oh,
Dr. Pepper, give her some credit.
Want to place money on this?
It is Diet Coke. It's not only Diet Coke. Specifically, it is free Diet Coke I got because they just had a CVS open today. So it is free Diet Coke, the best Diet Coke.
Yeah, see, everything tastes better when it's free, I guess.
Yeah, normally it would be Dr. Pepper, not Dr. Pepper, but hey, it was free, and I like free.
Free is good.
Yes.
So what about you, Thorin? What are you drinking tonight?
Well, I'm drinking something that may or may not be of interest to Lauren, actually. It's from Dogfish Head. So I know it's so rare that I find myself drinking something from that little brewery in Delaware. But damn it, they're just so good at coming up with a really ridiculous idea and actually making it work. It's called Tweezenale. I don't know why it's called Tweezenale, but it is. And it's a gluten-free, sorghum-based ale brewed with strawberries and buckwheat honey.
You had me told strawberries.
Yeah, honestly, for the folks watching, honestly, I think the strawberries are the bad part of here. It's not great. It's not bad. It's drinkable. I'm certainly not going to dump it, and I don't see a problem with it, but I don't think I'll be buying any more of it because the strawberries just don't come off right. But other than that, I mean, I think that I think they need to use the base of this beer to do some other gluten-free beers for those unfortunate souls out there who are tragically kept away from the glory that is beer by misuse of gluten.
That's really kind of interesting because, the first gluten-free beer I ever had was a sorghum beer, and I had it at what is that place called? The Melting Pot, the fondue place, and it was so vile that and my friend thought I was overreacting, and I'm like, no, and she tasted it, and she's like, oh my god, how can you drink? This is evil.
When it comes to trying to make something that can be gluten-free and still at least try to qualify as beer, sorghum's a pretty common.
So much the flavor of beer comes from grains.
It really does.
In fact, I venture to say almost all of it.
I have great, well, at least half of it. I have great sympathy for anybody who tries to brew a gluten-free beer. I brewed some really tough beers in my day that were really hard to get a handle on, and I can't even imagine how tough it is to try to brew beer without gluten. It's kind of insane. And I got to give a little bit of respect to any brewery that wants to try it, because to be able to market it as gluten-free, they've got to have dedicated equipment for that.
It is. It's you have to the
Or at the very
ppm.
least, some sort of method of being able to clean it in a way that makes it certified as gluten-free.
Well, in metal, it's super hard to do with a lot of things. I mean, yeah, you have to have dedicated vessels at least,
Yeah,
and I know the
that's just,
certification process is like we have a gluten-free bakery here that just got it, and it's a process.
yeah. And let me tell you, fermentation vessels are really expensive. Even for home brewers are expensive. For full-fledged breweries to be able to dedicate a vessel to gluten-free is, well, it's difficult. And
Well, you got at
that's,
that point you have to be an established brewery that's got some capital to invest in something like that.
well, and I think that's why most breweries don't even attempt it, is because there's not enough of a market for the most part to make it worth the investment of an entire vessel for gluten-free. And because most people who have issues with gluten usually aren't beer fans anyway.
And drink cider.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, let's be honest here. Considering there is really good cider out there, and it's not hard to make cider gluten-free,
Yeah.
you just don't reuse beer vessels and don't put malt in it like some idiot did. You'll be fine. God.
But on a finishing note with this beer, it's not terrible, and I think it's probably the best gluten-free beer I've had, and I've tried more than a few because I'm always curious. And I don't know, Lauren, if you happen to see it around a store, you might give it a swing. It's a little bit on the sweet side, which you'd expect with sorghum and strawberries, but
It is quite electrifyingly, like it may just be the lighting at your house, but it definitely looks quite pink. Or as they'd say in
it's
my
I
neck
think
of the woods,
it's just a lighting.
pank.
It's really
It's
not.
a light, yeah. It looked kind of pank
Yeah,
from
I
back
think it's
there.
just the lighting with the colors behind me and such.
Yeah.
It's really very much a dark tawny brown. It's just,
So
What are you drinking, Josh?
I am drinking a beer by Sound Brewery called Double Entendre, and it is a Abbey style ale, and it is quite delicious. And I know a lot of you have probably noticed my camera is off. My laptop just does not have the juice to run my camera and the third-party program it takes to do the streaming. So this is my fix. But if you go to the Heathen Talk Twitter, you can see pictures of both the bottle and the actual beer that I'm drinking tonight. And it's delicious. I'm definitely going to go buy myself a bottle just for my own personal consumption and not share my opinion with anyone else ever again. So, tonight we're talking about oaths. And they are super important. And Thorin is still muted.
I think he knows.
Okay, as long as he knows. As long as he knows. So we're talking about oaths and how important they are to heathenry. We're going to discuss a little bit about what they are, how to make them, and why they're important. And then, as always, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. In fact, I know that one of our fans has already submitted his question in advance. Thanks, Marcel. We appreciate it. So, I'm going to kick it over to Thorin for the first little bit here. Thorin, tell us about oaths. Tell us what they are. Tell us what you
okay.
know.
So, all right, oaths are one of those subjects that it's a lot easier to know what they are than to talk about what they are. Knowing what they are takes a little bit of learning, more than a little bit, I'd say. And I think that we're going to have a hard time all night. We're going to be stumbling over this topic again and again. And you guys are just going to have to put up with it because who else is going to try? So, how to start? Now, does anybody disagree with me? It might almost be easier to start with talking about some of the misconceptions and what an oath is not, than it will be necessarily talking about what the oath is.
I think before we talk about what they're not, we should lay a base for what they are.
Okay. I mean, I can at least go so far is an oath is a statement with an outcome made between the giver of the oath, the recipient of the oath, and witnesses. Now, that doesn't necessarily require three people. I'd be willing to say that there is, it is possible for the giver and the recipient to be the same person, but I think the witnesses are absolutely 100% required. And hilarious things are going on my television. I apologize for that. It's a little bit distracting. So, from that point, because I'm getting a little distracted, somebody tell me where I am.
You're talking about what oaths are.
Oh no, I caught that part. I didn't lose the plot so much, so I'm not sure what I'm talking about.
So
what am I leaving out here?
So let me try this. An oath is your word given in a formal setting. An oath is between two or more people, typically given by one person to another or to a gathered host, if you will. And they carry importance because an oath is binding in a metaphysical sense as well as the literal giving your word to someone sense. Any disagreements? Any agreements? Or am I going to have to change the subject because we are just not talking tonight?
No, we got to get into this one. Like I said, it's easier to talk about what it's not than what it is, but I do agree we should be talking about what it is and laying some groundwork.
And I think something I want to hit on right now, because I think something you said, Thorin, brought something to mind that I want to do kind of in establishing what an oath is. Let's talk about the difference between an oath and just a promise. Because I think that they are distinctly two different things.
I can't say you're wrong.
To me, for a heathen, now we're talking in the heathen concept, not necessarily just the grander design. If I make an oath, that oath is a religious thing. My oath is I am making a statement with witnesses that will directly affect my Megan, my family's, if I fail to fulfill it. If I had promised, say, oh man, yeah, I promise I'll be there at 2, and I show up at 2:05, that's a whole different ball game, because oaths are more solemn. They're important. They're just a whole different level of your word. And I think as we get into the episode, we start talking about oaths. How we handle oaths out here in the middle of the country, it can be different than how you guys handle it. I've noticed that in some of our conversations that we've had together. But oaths are also, to some degree, they're only taken in the heathen context in certain situations. Here, at least in my experience and what I've done, I know historically I'm sorry, guys. Historically, oaths were usually only, when it came to sacred, oaths, like what we think of, they were only taken at the thing. I learned that from reading books about the settlement of Iceland, or at least in Iceland, which is the best historical record we have. Oaths were not something that were done every day. They were done on special occasions. And I think that's another thing that defines what an oath is versus a promise or whatever. An oath is also done, it has witnesses, and it's done on certain occasions. In modern heathenry, it tends to be my experience that oaths are done at Sumbul or Sumbul, or however you want to pronounce it, at ritual, whatever that ritual happens to be. While in other circles, they're whereas I can't really speak outside of, other than Cascadian Mood. I'm gonna be honest, I've not really been to a ton of heathen events, with oaths involved that aren't in my general area.
And we very clearly kept oaths off the table during our symbol at Cascadian Mood.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to note that a promise is made oftentimes, one person to another, and rather flippantly in the modern world. Whereas if I take an oath, for instance, when I took an oath to join my group, it not only laid out my responsibilities, but it laid out ways to get out of it. It laid out it laid out consequences for failing to uphold it. It had a purpose to it, and that was to bind me to that people.
That's absolutely true. I mean, that's as we are creating our groups, and we're creating these fictive kinships. Most of the groups are oaths are what are bonding our groups together, and that's when we wrote because we kind of updated our kindred oath. One of the things we put into that oath was, how do you get out? There's what are the consequences? It's such something that has to be thought out.
And so I'm going to start a part of this conversation just because I keep trying to figure out how to put this out there as a single coherent idea, and I, for the life of me, can't do it. So I'm going to host source it. There are metaphysical consequences to oaths that don't necessarily exist for the promise.
Yes.
And while a promise made and failed, or made and succeeded with, can and will affect the luck of the individual and the luck of his tribe, it's very minor in comparison to the same thing with an oath. And part of that is going to be the weight of the topic involved with it. People don't make oaths about whether or not they're going to show up on time to carpool with their buddy to work. They make promises. So it's not nearly as huge of a consequence if the person is late. And but on the flip side, when you get into the concept of making an oath, you're on much bigger topics. Trying to think of a good example. I mean, I guess oathing into a tribe would be
marriage.
Marriage is a great example. There's pretty big consequences there. That's why that's an oath and not a promise.
Oaths of service, things like that as well.
Oaths of service, yeah, thank you. Here's the veteran completely forgetting that one. But yeah, do you see the point I'm going? And can anyone help me actually make that?
No, oaths are a big deal. I mean, oaths are what bind us together. If you think about it in a way, oaths are part of, at least the way I understand it and the way I feel about it. And of course, you please disagree with me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of hoping you guys will. Otherwise, I don't want this to get too echo chambery. Oaths are part of, to me, that gifting cycle. Oaths are, because usually when I am oathing to do something, it involves someone else, whether it is joining a kindred, or I'm going to use marriage because I think in general, marriage, at least in American society, is a little more universal than what different kindreds may have in their oath. And that's just because it is. When I married my husband, I promised to love him. I promised to work with him, to stay with him, to honor his beliefs, and he would honor mine. And I promised to spend the rest of my life with him. And those were words that, it wasn't like, I wrote my vows in 10 minutes and I was done. I put several weeks into those words because I knew that they were important and they meant something and they had witnesses of, our families and our friends. And I also, because of that, was very judicious in who I invited as well, because to me, making that oath in front of them included them in that oath in a way. But that's a regional thing. And some people don't believe it. Some people buy into it, some people don't. But our personal practice is that if you witness an oath, you are honor bound to help that person achieve that oath. So everyone who witnessed my and my husband's wedding oath, if they were heathen at least, but if they were heathen in our particular practice, would be bound to help us keep our marriage together should something happen.
Well, I would mostly agree with you. I would argue that the bind there isn't honor. The bind there is self-interest, because the bind properly is luck.
Yeah.
In a situation, So it's at least I think when you're being 100% clear with it, the thing that's making making the witness attempt to keep that or help that oath be kept isn't so much honor. It's them not wanting their own luck to suffer as a result of it.
I think where I'm confused here is that I'm not seeing the relation to the gift cycle except tangentially.
To me, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. I apologize. The relation to the gift cycle to me is that we have, when I am committed in that oath, there is a level of gifting involved, of gifting of my time. It's that reciprocation that is similar to the gifting cycle, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There is a reciprocation in those oaths because
I think
it's a gift. An oath is a gift.
I think you could say that they're parallel concepts, and that if I'm giving my oath, then I'm expected to fulfill it, and that in turn, gets some reciprocation from my community. But I don't think that it's truly. You're not going to see an oath for an oath, right? You'll see a gift for a gift, but if I give my oath to... Oaths of membership are different, because when I gave my oath to my people, I received an oath in turn.
Yeah.
But if it's an oath to do something specific, then in reality, the onus to complete the oath is on me, and the consequences are distributed. Oftentimes, they're more dire for me, but it behooves everyone for me to complete that oath.
Right.
So, I'm going to be the asshole here that's going to ask you guys to do a thing that I am finding myself completely capable of doing. So, I would argue that in a conversation like this, we can talk these hypotheticals all day and not help anyone. I've been trying to think of specific examples outside of the more formulaic oaths, like marriage or enlistment oaths and whatnot.
Can I talk about the oath, as it's known around here, kind of legendary? Because I think this might be a good thing to discuss, and I know, and this is one I feel comfortable discussing on air. Okay. And for those of you playing at home who are from Arkansas, you all probably know about the oath. So when I was a baby heathen, and I mean a baby heathen, I had maybe been heathen for like 6 months. My husband at the time and I hosted some heathens from our state and some people from out of state in our home for a kind of informal symbol and get together and drinking. And it was, so we are all at this event and we're going around and we're having symbol and everything's great. And a guy that we had met like one time before gives a rather serious and difficult oath. He oathed that he would, if he lost his house to foreclosure because he was having some problems, that he would commit suicide. And let me tell you what, that the older, like all the, and this guy had been heathen for probably as long as I've been alive at that point. I mean, a long time. And so the his Gothi was there. The leader of their tribe was there. We had another guy there who was a Gothi, and they all kind of went and kind of talked. And I'm just like, I'm doing fish mouth at that point. But and so it was explained to me by the late Rod Landreth, who was there at the time. We all talked about it, and that was kind of my first real introduction to oaths. Was this man who was so desperate and so heartfelt, saying, "Listen, these are my two options. I'm going to keep my land, or I'm going to die." There were no other, because he started out, well, and he even started out, "I'm going to oath to keep my land." And so we challenged him, which is, kind of common here. So if you're, if you don't fulfill it, what are you going to do? I'm going to kill myself. So we, we, uh, they talked, his kindred talked, they finally all decided to accept this oath. And it was heavy on me because here now I am as this baby fledgling heathen tied to this man's success and this man's luck. If he kills himself, and we told him, I said, part of this, that he was told by the group, I didn't tell him, I know nothing at the time. Part of this oath is you have to be willing to call on us if you get in that point where you might be in danger of losing your house. So he agreed, and yeah, he passed away. Oh goodness, oh God, 10 years later, at least 10 years later, at that house. He had a stroke and passed away. But it's just to me, that was kind of like that was my introduction to heathenry right there. That was my introduction to oaths. Oaths are, with that kind of thing, I mean, I feel like a lot of time oaths are something that is very, at least in my experience, oaths are something that you're very, I don't want to say passionate because that doesn't seem like the right word, but there's a huge investment.
To quote the internet, oaths are serious business.
Yes. I mean, they're such a huge thing. It's a situation where we have to, make this huge investment. I have a friend of mine, a good friend of mine that's heathen, who made, and I salute her. We're talking about oaths. Heather, you fulfilled your oath, and I'm very proud of you. She oathed to have the rough draft of her heathen children's book done, and it's fully, it's painted, it's gorgeous stuff, and but that was something that she was super passionate about, something that she felt was going to be this incredibly huge contribution into her community by doing this. And that's what oaths are about. They're not about, to me, oaths are the big things. Oaths are the important things. Oaths are, and to be cliche, they are the joining the kindred, the getting married, the having children to some degree. To some people involves a level of oathing. Adoption involves certainly a huge level of oathing, and that's something that I'm mulling over right now. There's just a lot of, oaths are huge and they're important, and we have to recognize that level.
So I've got questions about the oath.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, it brings in some interesting possibilities of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the witnesses and the binding of luck.
Yeah.
And we've talked about consequences, which was obviously something covered in that particular oath. Was he helped by his community and the witnesses involved to keep his oath?
You know what?
Or did he do it on his own?
Yes, he was to some degree, but I don't know. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know all the specifics, just because of life, but it's definitely one of those things where, yeah, I know that there was a lot of help to help him stay in a position where he could stay financially solvent. I know he did get a lot of help with that.
Okay, I mean, and the reason I bring that up is because that leads right into the responsibility of the person making the oath to realize how he's binding the witnesses.
Well, and that was,
Binding his people.
yeah, and but the thing is that was with that kind of oath, and with, that was the discussion that went in. That was, you're not going to be able to make this oath until we all agree that this is okay. And we all agree that this is going to be something that we feel comfortable with, not just what you want to do. And I think that was a big part of it. Somebody else talk. I'm tired of talking.
Sorry, I was trying to
I mean-
resolve phantom technical issues.
Oh, I know.
People keep accusing my mic of being quiet.
It's because it was like 4 feet away from your mouth.
No, it was like 12 inches away from my mouth.
The oath
Believe me,
is a pretty heavy subject. I mean,
and but at the same time, it's kind of interesting that as new people have joined that kindred, the oath has become like a legend. The oath has become like oh my god, the oath. It's an example of what not to do, but also an example of kind of the power of it.
But is it an example of what not to do?
Well, in the sense of you don't randomly spring it at an informal symbol in someone's living room.
Okay, that's fair.
Let me that not necessarily it's an example of what not to do in the sense of like it's not a good oath to make, but in the example of that's the kind of thing you say for like your kindred Yule gathering or something like that, not for baby heathens host symbol in their house some random Saturday night.
So this brings up an interesting change of topic. And we've gotten essentially two questions on this same subject. Marcel asked very pointedly, what validates an oath? And in the chat, there was also the question about someone saying he would do something, swearing he would do something, but it not being in person and not being sober, etc., etc. So, in your case, it was an informal symbol, but what does that what makes an oath a valid oath versus just words?
Well, for us, now here's the thing: there's going to be some things I think that are definite, and there's going to be some things that are super like regional. So I would even go down to tribal level. To me, if it's an oath, it happens at a sacred event. Symbol is a sacred event, whether it's formal or informal. It is. It happens with intention about something that is a passionate or serious subject. It's not just, oh man, I oath that I'm gonna blah blah blah. Something like jackassy. And I'll be honest, I won't accept an oath if someone's not sober. That I'm just gonna flat out tell you. That is that's kind of our own personal. If you're not sober, then you don't, you're impaired, and I don't think you can make. I just don't think you can make an oath if you're not sober. In the same way that legally you can't get married if you're drunk.
I thought we were going to go down the route of consent.
Yes.
Can a drunk person legally consent to an oath?
Drunk people can't legally consent to pretty much anything at this point. So, no.
But that's generally because I just know that I have been a jackass when drunk, and I personally think it's kind of like I wouldn't let most 15, 16-year-olds make an oath, like a serious oath, because 15 and 16-year-olds in general are not emotionally mature enough to handle it. Just like, they're not emotionally mature enough to handle getting married.
Well, to be perfectly fair, most people fall into that same category.
Yeah.
So, essentially, what we're saying is an oath sobriety is necessary.
For me, at least, it is.
I know.
I'm gonna
Go
go ahead and call that one solidly an issue of thing, the sobriety part.
That was going to be my next thing. Was there are certain parts of this
Okay.
that are thu that are going to be decided on a group level, a tribal level, kindred level, whatever you want to call it. At the same time, there are certain things that do make an oath that are purely heathen. For instance, an oath cannot be made between you and someone who can't accept said oath.
Yeah.
An oath must be accepted.
I agree. Now, here is one that I'm going to throw out to you guys because I'm not sure. I know that this is a very kind of regional thing, but I don't know how far it expands. So I want to kind of toss this out here and see if this is what you guys also do. Because I'm going to be honest, it's something that I'm not, it works. And so we do it, but I'm not 110% sure, like the actual roots of it. It's just kind of how we've always done it. If you make an oath within our particular spheres, it has to be something with a like viable, like it has to have a measurable, it's like a scientific experiment. It has to have a measurable outcome. You can't just oath to say, I'm going to get better at running. You have
I'm
to
going to be
oath.
a better person.
Yeah, well, you can't just say, I oath that I'm going to get better at running. No. What the oath is, I oath that I will run a 5K race by December. Or I'll use Heather's book as an example. She oathed to have her rough draft done by midsummer. And that's a measurable and obtainable oath. Now that's how we roll in Arkansas. I don't know about other people, and I'd love to hear if that's how things work where you are, if we're just weirdos, or if this is some sort of heathen thing and it's just not something I've really discussed with people.
In the conversations I've had, an oath needs to be something with it's essentially like it needs to have a goal, an end point, a setting, right?
Right.
For instance, and hold oaths are a little different, right? Because your hold oath is an oath to behave a certain way and to live within the culture of the group you're oathing to. But if you're oathing to complete something or making just a general oath, and it doesn't have something that can show that you've succeeded at the oath, then how can you help but fail at it?
Right. Absolutely.
I would say that to use the terminology of hold oath, that's one of those special exception type situations. But beyond that, there has to be a possibility of fulfilling the oath.
Well, yeah, I think hold oaths, and I think that maybe another possible, examples of there are certain oaths that I think there are certain oaths you can make to a person, such as even marriage, that are a little different than what we're talking about.
But those oaths, even those oaths, have measurable
Right.
goals, right? Like my hold oath had specific things. I had to promise to do these things, and yes, it's perpetual. I'm doing them for as long as I'm held by the oath. But the failure was the finite point, what it would take to fail in the oath, right? So even a hold oath has that thing that defines it, that sets its parameters.
But can you fulfill a hold oath?
No, you can fail at a hold oath.
And I think that's the difference that we're hinting at here. Is that's the difference between a hold oath, a marriage oath, things like that. There's no end to it. Whereas I'm struggling to come up with a unique oath, by which I mean an oath that is a one-off, I guess, that doesn't have a point of completion. Where the oath is satisfied.
And I don't think there is one. I think that there is an oath you make, and you see him in sagas, you see him in fiction a lot.
Right. Well, I mean,
where you see
why, yeah, which is why I'm attempting to categorize, I guess you can say. you have your I don't know what kind of terminology you use for that. Your life oaths versus the rest of your oaths. Because I mean, in theory, you know, the ones that I'm tentatively calling life oath, even though I really am not liking that terminology, I just can't think of anything better. They only have an option of death or failure, or release.
Right.
I suppose is an option that should be thrown out there. But death, failure, or relief, there is no success. There is no oath fulfilled. Whereas, you know, on the flip side, even my enlistment oath, when I enlisted in the Navy, there was an endpoint. It wasn't mentioned in the oath itself, but it was implied by everything that surrounded the oath. You know, my enlistment oath was successful 5 years from the day that I took it. So, I mean, does that make sense? I mean,
we could argue semantics there.
I guess I'm nitpicking. I might be nitpicking here. So the basic question I'm asking is: it necessary to recognize the difference between these two types of oath?
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary to recognize that there are different types of oaths, and there are different things that make those oaths valid. For instance, a hold oath must be, and I don't think you can give an oath to the entire group. I think the oath has to be given to an individual, which is why the position of chieftain, gothi, leader, whoever is in charge of things is so valuable, because an oath should be given to a person so that that person can be the one who holds you accountable to it. But the delineation of the different types, whether it's, as you're calling it, a life oath or a perpetual oath versus a objective driven oath, is important, because you need to know where you stand, you know.
Okay, guys, sorry.
You all right there, Lauren?
I think I just broke my toe.
That's why I was asking if you're right.
Don't break your toe on air. That's bad publicity.
Oh man, no. Well, you know, I've had a desk fall apart. I've hurt myself. At this point in time, it may be good publicity. People are turning in to see what other disaster happens to Lauren. But no.
We should have a fundraiser to put Lauren in traction. Put Lauren in traction during podcasts.
Wrap Lauren in bubble wrap.
If you'd like to donate to the Keep Lauren Safe Fund, you can call 555-LAUREN.
Yeah,
and if you can figure out how to spell that on a phone, you're absolutely...
So I want to throw this out here to you guys. Yeah, if you want to donate to the Keep Lauren Safe Fund, go to our Patreon. You know, I think that the oaths are, I think that when it comes to like life oaths or hold oaths, they are both oaths. I cannot say oath tonight. God damn. They're both oaths. They're both important. They both build community, and they build our community, and they build families. They build careers. But in general, I often find that those oaths, they have to be given to someone. Whereas when I have, you know, when we do, and we don't, you know, we have basically, you know, if we don't do necessarily a hold oath, we refer to ours as like, ours is more of a blood brothership, a blood, you know, a fealty oath. It's less of a hold oath. But and it's given to the entire tribe. It's not just given to one person, because we are, in a sense, you know, our understanding and the way we kind of feel it is we are adopting them. So, you know, I think that they have different measurable outcomes, but they're still oaths, and I think they both hold high spiritual importance. Now, I wanna want to toss this out here because this question was brought up. What are the spiritual consequences of failing an oath, and what are the physical consequences? The physical consequences are kind of hard to answer because it's going to depend on like what is your, are you part of a tribe that does the consequence clause in all your oaths like we do? Are you part of a group that does that? Physical is going to be kind of weird to answer just because that's really going to be dependent on the oath, Um, I mean, I had a friend who made that, a running oath like that. And well, it necessarily wasn't a physical consequence, it was a financial consequence. He oathed that if he didn't, that he would donate. If he didn't do the 5K, he would donate like triple what it would have cost him to do the 5K to the charity the 5K was for. So, if it was a $30 to enter, he had to do, 90. That was his particular. It just depends on, I think it really does depend on your perspective, and it depends on what the oath is, what your people do. I mean, that's I think. I don't know, Thorin, help me out here.
Okay. The physical consequences are going to be a case by case basis.
Yeah.
Because that does, like you said, the concept of built-in consequences, which there absolutely should be.
Yeah.
In both, because people don't necessarily easily always see or feel the metaphysical consequences enough to understand what's happening on that realm. And to clarify a little bit, I use the word metaphysical because, at least in this capacity, I don't think the word spiritual is the right word. So I'm changing the nature of the question, and the person who asked it can. I decided the question is different now, and substituting the word metaphysical. That seems too cool.
We're special. What can I say?
And by what I mean by that is, so when you fail at a proper oath, you are affecting your luck. You are affecting the luck of the witnesses of that oath. And that is not always going to have an immediate and easily quantifiable effect. So the physical concept is kind of there, is important because it gives you that feedback you really need. And I have taken oaths without built-in consequence when I was a young and dumb baby heathen, and I continue to fulfill that oath. And it's also an oath with, while it does have a condition for being satisfied, probably never will be, and I knew that going into it. It was a stupid oath. I will say it's extremely important to keep your stupid oaths. Simply because there are, even if you didn't include the physical consequences, there are metaphysical consequences. And to build on that, and also to help stress the whole concept of the metaphysical consequences, is without the physical consequences, it's a lot harder to mitigate the metaphysical consequences.
Yeah.
If you take an oath and you build in consequences for failure, then those consequences for failure themselves are what satisfy the oath. Your oath is this or that.
Right.
You build in a consequence. I will by the end of the year run a 5K, or I will pay 3 times the entry fee to whatever charity. When you are basically saying, I will do one of these 2 things. So automatically you are building in a way that oath is successful. That's not a failed oath.
No, it's not.
If a person makes that oath and at the end of that oath is not able to run that 5K but pays that $90 anyway, that's not a failed oath. That is a successful oath. And that's one of the reasons that is important. Had he not built into that, had he just made the oath in front of witnesses, binding the luck of himself and all the others to run that 5K and then fail, there's no way out of those of that which is going to fall upon the luck of him and his people.
Nope.
Now, how serious the impact of that is going to be is going to vary, largely on the seriousness of the oath. Personally, I don't view I'm going to run a 5K to be a hugely important or serious oath, but it's going to impact their luck nonetheless.
Well, and Thorin, you say that, but let's just okay. So I'm going to throw this out here. You're in a situation where you desperately need to improve your health, and you make that oath as part of that. It could have, I know you said that that running that 5K wasn't a serious oath, but there are absolutely people who are in circumstances where that kind of oath is a super serious and super important oath, and so I don't want to dismiss that.
Well, I'm not dismissing that necessarily. What I'm saying is, there are certainly differences between, I'm going to run a 5K, which certainly the going from a health point where you're unable to run a 5K to a health point where you're able to run a 5K is certainly a serious matter as far as, changing your ability to serve your people.
Right.
In a physical capacity. And, well, honestly, that's probably increasing your lifespan too, which helps a little bit when it comes to people. But I'm saying that as a measurement against other oaths that have much more serious consequences in both directions.
Right.
There's also it's also important to note here that the oath "I'm going to run a 5K" is different than the oath "I'm going to be healthy enough to run a 5K." Those are two different statements.
I agree, but I don't think that I'm going to be healthy enough to run a 5K is necessarily a valid oath.
I agree with you because there's no way to quantify it.
There very much is a way
to run a 5K. How do you quantify that without running the 5K?
The consequence of the oath, right? So I'm going to run a 5K. If you are a runner and that is your oath, that oath means nothing.
Right.
You're going to go and do what you love to do. If I make the oath, I'm going to become healthy enough to run a 5K. My goal is to run a 5K, right? I'm putting that endpoint in there, but I'm saying the reason I'm doing it. It's providing a different level of commitment. Because, let's be honest, if you're a fan of the show, you've seen pictures of me. I ain't running a 5K anytime soon.
Well, and you could even say, if you are someone who can run a 5K, you could also see I'm going to improve my 5K time would be a much different oath than I'm going to run this 5K.
Well, one point that I want to get into here that I was trying to expand upon when I was talking about the seriousness of the oath. One of the ways that I rate the seriousness of this person's oath to, be able to run a 5K at the end of it or not is also based on the consequences themselves. The hypothetical here was I'm going to run this 5K or I'm going to pay 3 times the entry.
Yeah, I just tossed. And to be honest, it was total. Right, I just made some
absolutely. Shit up. Absolutely. At this point, I'm running with that hypothetical. In this hypothetical, the entry fee was $30. The consequence was $90. $90 is not a very serious consequence. And therefore, it's not a very serious oath.
Right, okay. I'm there with you now.
That's kind of where I was going with that. And I wanted to bring that up because that also brings up the idea of appropriate built-in consequences, because it is useless to make a grandiose oath that should be huge and monumental and life-altering and tribe-altering, and then build in a ridiculous, paltry, easily achievable consequence.
I agree.
And I go back to the whole, let's take the oath again that was mentioned earlier. I'm going to retain ownership of my land or I'm going to commit suicide is a monumentally serious oath.
Yes.
In a multitude of ways that we could spend half an episode going through. if he had said, I'm going to retain my land or I am going to move into an apartment instead.
That's not an oath. That's a statement of fact.
Exactly. Or I'm going to maintain my land or I'm going to start saving half of my mortgage instead. That's not
Yeah.
much because, I'm sure that rent on a small studio apartment is a lot less than your mortgage was. And there's not a lot of sacrifice in keeping the consequence end of that oath or keeping. And honestly, I would. We talk a lot about building the consequences. And I think a shift in language might actually be appropriate here. Is you have your primary and secondary oath is actually
Yeah.
a more complete way of looking at it because you are trying to build an oath that one way or the other is going to be kept.
Now I wanna kind of toss this out here as part of that, because part of that, because I think an oath that has like a real consequence that of not keeping it, and not just for you, but for the person you give it to, is marriage. Um, Divorce is hell, and I wouldn't wish it on my ex-husband. Um, but I mean, my first husband and I were married. We made oaths. We did not have necessarily an escape clause, as it were. Um, and we went through a hellacious and horrible divorce. He violated, he was he violated our oath, our marriage oath. And so but you know what, it didn't matter because it had these incredibly hard, not just implications on me, not implications on him. It hurt our kindred, it hurt our families. He broke this very serious oath by having relations with another woman. And it wasn't just his luck, his Megan. It wasn't just his well-being that was hurt. It rippled out into the entire community. And I think it's a really good example of the consequences of not keeping an oath, not just affecting you. It hurt his children as well.
Well, and I think one of the factors we keep returning to when it comes to oaths is consequence, right? And the importance of it. Whether it's the metaphysical consequences of breaking an oath, which revolve around your luck and your main, but also the real world consequences of breaking an oath, whether it's a marriage vow that causes your children pain, or a service oath where you end up, doing time in prison because you sold secrets to some shady dude on the corner in your hometown. There are consequences to breaking oaths, and that's something that can't be discounted.
Now, can we talk about the other side of this?
Which side would that be?
Uh, the reward of keeping an oath.
Start us out.
I mean, there's something incredibly rewarding, not only in like achieving something that you've oathed to do, but watching someone who's part of your tribe, your community, your kindred achieve something and fulfill an oath. Watching my kindred brother fulfill his oath to have his book published, or watching Lisa, my friend Heather, who just fulfilled her oath to do with her children's book, or a lot of people around me are oathing things involving books, I've noticed. But there's something really joyful about seeing that. It's really, I can't really explain it any other way, except it's just, it builds such confidence in yourself. It builds confidence in your tribe. It increases in my experience, your worth within your tribe, your worth to your family. Um, and that, like I said, those are my own personal experiences to speak of.
So an oath fulfilled brings fortune, and
Hmm.
not necessarily you know, fortune as Scrooge McDuck fortune, but fortune, right? Like you take a hold oath, and as you are fulfilling it daily, right, you're bringing fortune to your people. You're bringing them luck. If your oath is to publish a book, you are bringing yourself fortune as your name and reputation increases, as does your pocketbook sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. So the fulfillment of an oath has its own consequence, and that consequence is typically good fortune.
Typically, I mean, besides the you know physical outcome of the oath that you mentioned, which some oaths have and some oaths don't. But yeah, there's a topic I think we need to touch on. It's been mentioned in the IRC, and even though only one person really brought it up in the IRC, and a lot of people are trying to answer it there and doing a good job of it. I still think it needs to be brought up out loud in the episode because it is so common in conversations about taking oaths in heathen and Asatru circles, is the role of the gods in an oath. And I'll start out giving the short answer that they don't necessarily have anything to do with your oath.
Not typically. Very atypically would they have anything to do with your oath.
I would say usually they have nothing to do with it, and asking about, asking of the gods in relation to an oath usually is sort of a non-starter. It's like talking about whether or not you need to change the tires on your snowboard.
Well, the thing is that many of us come from a punitive religious culture, where there is this, there's a belief. I grew up with this whole idea that if you did something bad, there was a pretty decent chance, even though none of us knew anyone that actually happened to, there was this punitive chance that you were going to get struck down by lightning. I don't really understand where this came from, but it was a genuine fear as a child that, oh, if I do something bad, there's a song on YouTube, and I'm about to drop the F-bomb, guys. I apologize. We're an hour and 10 minutes in almost, but there's this song, and it's about the Christian God, and it's called "He'll Fuck You Up." God will fuck you up, and that's kind of that punitive way. It's hard to shed that. So then you think, oh crap. Well, if I fail my oath, is Odin going to come beat my ass? And the answer is probably not.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, we've kind of covered, who's involved in an oath and what's involved in an oath. And up to this point, those astute listeners who've been paying very close attention to us will have noticed that up until this point, we haven't mentioned any role of the gods at all. Because the gods are not listening to your oath. Or they might be, but even if they are, there's a damn good chance they're not involved in it. And I'd in fact say a very likely chance that they're not involved in it.
Which isn't to say that, and again, a lot of people tie the idea of the divine into the metaphysical aspects of the oath, right? So when we say that, Odin isn't going to come and beat you up for violating an oath, you can also look through the sagas and see where oaths have been made specifically to gods and been heard by said gods, and breaking them has had severe consequences, specifically with Odin. There are a few sagas where someone will make an oath to Odin, and Odin will hear the oath, and then they'll break the oath and then die violently and horrifically.
Yep.
Well, that's very much a concept of we go back to the seriousness of the oath. And, we talked about the content of the oath determining its seriousness, but in many ways, the recipient of the oath can reflect its seriousness. I am not in any way, shape, or form going to, in my statement now, disparage an oath, a hold oath. I find those to be extremely important oaths. But from the point of view of consequence, they have less consequence than in most settings than, say, an oath of enlistment.
Especially in today's culture.
Right. A person who breaks a hold oath to my tribe is going to face, the obvious metaphysical concepts or consequences that come of it, and they're going to face the consequences of having crossed my tribe and by facing those consequences, they're also facing those who are close to my tribe. Uh, I'll throw an example out there. I'm going to keep this a little bit vague, but there is a tribe locally here that is very close with my tribe. We are in constant communication with one another. When people in my area are looking for people, they know about it, and vice versa. We tell each other, we try to do things together. My tribe has gone out to their tribe's land to help them build. And we keep in contact with each other on local issues as well to try to act in concert on things. We have a very close relationship between our tribes. There is a person who broke their oath to the other tribe, and that person is mything to my tribe as a result. And the same would hold true. If somebody were to break their oath to my tribe, then I guarantee you that it would take a single phone call for that person to also be mything to that tribe. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw that out, go back to the oath of enlistment. The person who's mything to our two tribes can easily get by in the world without any super huge lasting consequences. They're going to have some issues in the local heathen community, and they might even have some issues in the larger world of heathens, just because both my tribe and the other tribe have heathens of that are relatively well known and respected. But that's still not going to even begin to measure up to the consequences of breaking an oath of enlistment to a person's life. If you break an oath of enlistment, you're facing, you might even face jail, but if nothing else, you've just screwed up your entire life, and you've got to make it really hard to get it back on track. I mean, people who break that oath have a hard time getting a job at McDonald's. So, who you take the oath to is a huge part of how serious that oath is. And to bring that back around to what we were talking about, you take an oath to Odin, it's kind of a big deal. Even if your oath to Odin is that I'm not going to eat French fries, any more than 2 days a week, your oath just became a much, and I highly suggest that nobody ever even begin to think about taking that oath. It's a stupid oath to bother the Allfather with. I just want to throw that out there. But I am going to say that you just made that oath gigantically, monumentally huge by involving Odin. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think that oaths tie, this is something you said, something that I want to tie into, because it's something I don't feel like we've touched on, it is, in my opinion, as important as all the rest of everything we've talked about, the role of oaths in reputation culture. Your oath, whether you keep an oath or don't keep an oath, and you talk about someone becoming into things, somebody becoming, an outlaw, that's important. That is your reputation is so much. And I can't tell you the number of times in a year I'm in a conversation with someone because we're doing a reputation check, honestly.
Yeah.
Somebody contacts me or I contact somebody else because I'm trying to find out if so and so is a good person or if so and so is a batshit crazy racist.
Yeah, web reputation is a big thing. We constantly hit you guys up to send us your suggestions for toasts. When you do, there's a handful of people who I am going to give that name to and say, have you heard of this person? What can you tell me about them? Is this person somebody who's got some, hidden crazy shit in their closet that we don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole? We'd like to know about that if it is. And I don't necessarily expect the person who's suggesting them to tell Heathen Talk that person also spends most of their time wearing a swastika and an armband. And the flip side is we absolutely love it when we find out that there are people that we have some respect for that do know that person and are totally okay with them. Was it last week or the week before that we toasted the heathen out in Pennsylvania, Mike?
Yeah,
Michael.
last week.
Last week, yeah, and we got instant feedback from it was Lucas that gave us the instant feedback, wasn't it, on that? Lucas Hagel.
Well, and one of the other things that I want to throw in there is sometimes that's not even necessarily like it's not even necessarily that particular person. If I was okay, for instance, if I were trying to validate you and I heard somebody was a member of, and I'm going to use Bifrost Way Kindred because they're my friends and I'm speaking good. But if somebody tells me that if I find out someone and I'm able to verify that this person's a member of Bifrost Way, I immediately know what their reputation is. I know the kind of people that they come from. And I know that, even in that regard, if someone were to make some sort of oath and they were part of that group, I would have a whole lot of faith and confidence in them achieving it compared to, somebody who I don't know. I mean, just some rando off the street.
No, I would say the same thing locally about Hawks Oak Kindred. If I find that someone's a member of that kindred, I'm not going to question their worth because I know their worth through their people.
I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, your oaths are also, we talk about, there's that cliche of we are our deeds, but your oaths are deeds because oaths are more than words; they're actions.
Well, I think our producer Matthew earlier put it that an oath is a concept made into an action.
Yes.
I think I phrased it poorly, but it was something like that, and it's a pretty good way of summing it up.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions from the chat?
We did. I just saw one. It was from Lost Penguin. It says, "So if the gods aren't punishing me for failing my oath, who is?" And I thought we covered that, but if the question's being asked, we might not.
Well, let me see if I can put it into simple terms then. The concept of punishment when it comes to an oath is not necessarily accurate, first off. Secondly, the people who are holding you accountable to your oath are the people who hear it. Thus, if you are making an oath to your tribe, or your chieftain, or your brother, the person who is responsible for holding you to the consequence of failing the oath is the person who took the oath.
Absolutely.
A consequence is not the same as a punishment.
I don't know if everybody heard that. That was Matthew in the background saying a consequence is not the same as a punishment.
Absolutely.
Well, and once again, this is going to come down to personal belief. I think that the greater universe I have a hard time putting a word on this, but I firmly believe when we have luck and we have this spiritual Megan, and I think that there is an ebb and flow in the universe that doles that out and takes that away, and that's going to be one of your consequences of not keeping an oath is going to be that there is going to be a reduction in your spiritual power. There's going to be a reduction in your luck, and that has a ripple effect out to everyone within your circles of obligation.
Right.
Thorin, do you have anything to add there?
On that particular subject, I don't believe I do.
So
I want to talk about something that's unless you have something else, Josh. I had
one
more topic.
Go ahead. I was going to make something up.
Okay. We've kind of danced around this topic, but I think something that I want to get actual substantive thoughts and answers on is what. Okay, so we're gonna have pretend time. I am coming to you as you're either the Lord of the Hall, or or in whatever position, or you are my tribal leader, and I am wanting to make an oath.
Hmm.
What do you, Torin? I'll start with you. What do you tell me? I want to make an oath. Um, how do you guide someone? What advice do you give them on how to build an oath?
Uh, we start out with why. It's always the first question anybody should ask themselves or ask somebody who's seeking advice. Why are you making this oath? If you can't satisfactorily answer that question right off the bat, then the answer is you shouldn't be making the oath. Why is this important? And why does it need to be an oath? Why is it not just something you can do? Um, I want to ask that person, and a lot of it is me going to be asking that person to make sure they're thinking. Uh, so we start out with that why, and then we move on to, well, what consequences are you suggesting? And have you thought this through? All of these things are important. And then I start on well, have you thought about failing? Because you always have to think about failing. And there's a current in our culture, in the yoga culture, about not focusing on the negative and blah blah. But sometimes you just gotta have to in a harsh way. In my tribe, I'm not going to even begin to entertain an oath that I think is likely to lead to damage to my tribe. So, if you can't answer those simple questions in a satisfactory manner, then I'm not just going to, at least in the context of my tribe, I'm not just going to advise you not to. I'm going to tell you that neither I nor anyone.
I think that you brought up a really good point. In the first step is why, and I think that really a lot of times when it comes to oaths, in my own personal self, because I have the person, I have the nature where I want to be special. I want to be a special snowflake. I want to be, and so oaths, like anything else, can be abused in that way. So it really is good to have that counsel of someone else to say, why are you doing this? Really, why? You know, my marriage vows needed to be an oath. But, I don't need to, Lord knows I don't need to try like oath, like I'm going to lose weight, because that ain't, that's never going to end up good. Um, it's a situation where you really have to figure out why, but don't at the same time make oaths. They are also important because they do help build reputation and luck. Um, that's going to be the first question I'm going to ask. The second question I'm going to ask is, okay, give me a finite goal, and go and think, not right now, go and think about it. What's your finite goal? Not, and that's the difference between I'm going to run faster and I'm going to improve my time on the 5K by 2 minutes. Give me a verifiable goal, give me a time frame, and give me an alternate oath. I need all of those in place, then come talk to me, and then we'll figure out whether or not we'll let you give that oath at Symbol. And we have somebody at Symbol who challenges. If somebody tries to get up and give an oath, even if after it's been run through, we still challenge them on that oath before it's fully made in Symbol.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's an important thing too, as we talked about the giving of oaths. Yeah, excuse me, giving of oaths in formal settings and ritual settings, and there is a form and function to that as well. And one of those functions, one of the reasons why a formal setting is often extremely important. I'm not going to claim it's vital. That's going to be an issue of fail. But the existence of the thula, or whatever your tribe happens to call that person who is guarding the luck of the tribe in that situation, is extremely important. And that's not good. That's not necessarily going to be your chieftain or your gothi or your priest or whatnot. In a ritual, excuse me, in a ritual setting in a symbol, I am not the Thula because I'm the chieftain. I'm the holder of the luck. I have assigned somebody else to defend the luck, and that person has to be the type of person that can recognize when a bad oath is being given. And I want to clarify something here as well. I think it's kind of important. We talked about not hearing oaths, and it seems in that verbiage that there's a way for somebody to, sneak one past, to just go ahead and do it. just give the oath, and it's done, and now you don't have a choice. And I just want to point out to everybody that's horseshit. Just because you speak an oath doesn't mean that we heard it. And hearing it is in and of itself a formal thing. It's an acknowledgement. You can come into a symbol and you can speak an oath, and I can hear what you said in a physical manner without hearing your oath, capital H, hearing it.
Well, that's like you can make an oath too. That's why to me I struggle with people who, especially more casually, make oaths to the gods, because how do you know if they've heard it? How do you know if they're really witnessing it?
Part of it there is just your the consent factor.
Yeah.
It's like if nobody in that symbol that has any sort of authority consents to hear the oath, then the oath isn't heard, no matter how loud it's spoken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where the act of giving an oath is an action. It's active. It's not something you can do passively. Yeah. The act of hearing it is also an action. It's something you must do actively.
Absolutely. I mean, like we said earlier, we told people that we weren't allowing oaths at the symbol at Cascadian Oath, and that didn't mean that we had any way, shape, or form of physically stopping a person from giving an oath. That meant that we, as the people who were in control of that hall, were absolutely able to prevent the hall from hearing it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, and we had someone try to give an oath in our last symbol, and our Thule challenged it, and they ended up understanding that it wasn't how things are, and they withdrew, even trying to give one. And that, that's another thing, paying that's another part of it is, you set expectations. I just want to say that for everything, please, when you have groups of people, set expectations. That's just good leadership.
Right. No, absolutely. Honestly, you're probably never going to run into a situation of having to make that distinction. We set out from the beginning, we made the expectation, or set the expectation that we were not hearing oaths for the symbol Cascadian Oath, and nobody tried to give one, because we were pretty clear about it. The likelihood of anybody trying to, I guess, lawyer their way past that was pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is 8:28, and we've been going for a solid 90 minutes on oaths and been having a great time with it. So I just want to remind everybody, if you disagree with us on something or you have questions for us, you can reach out to us at Heathen Talk on Facebook, facebook.com/Heathen Talk. We have the Patreon, patreon.com/Heathen Talk. We have at Heathen_Talk on Twitter.
It's at heathentalk.com.
It is all at heathentalk.com. If you want to reach out to us, you want to talk to us, you want us to answer a question of yours, please reach out to us. Be patient with us. We all work full-time jobs. Some of us are students on top of that. But when we have a moment, we will take our time to answer your questions.
Give me an excuse not to work.
Does anyone else have anything they want to talk about?
Well, we're self-fishing for topics for future shows. I know that while I absolutely refuse to commit to any dates, we've got another Ladies' Night coming up soon. We've got another Military Coup episode coming up soon, and I would like to start a writing campaign uh, for all of you fans out there to tell Josh he needs to come up with his own game night, where me and Lauren can get kicked the hell off while Josh takes over, because I think that's important.
Also, don't forget, guys, that we do coming up, what, 2 weeks now? 3 weeks. Is it 2 or 3 weeks? I suck at like time. 3 weeks is the Viking Festival up in
It's
Auburn.
first weekend of October.
Yeah.
It's the easiest
So
way to say
that
it.
you will be able to meet Josh, Thorin, and Matt. Not me, though, but get out there, go have some fun, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. And just remember, y'all are doing it wrong.
You're not the boss of me.
Everybody have a great week.